Hello everyone, my name is Kieran. Welcome back to the channel. Ignore the fact I haven't uploaded in about a month and a half, 2 months probably by the time this has been posted. I just kind of haven't been bothered. But in every other bit of retrospect, we're here recording stupid amounts of videos to go out through June, and we're starting off with none other than Accrington Stanley, 2023-24 Accrington Stanley edition. Very pleased to be joined by Rebecca. So first of all, how are you doing today?
I am very good, thank you. Excited to be on. Excited to be talking everything Accrington. How are you?
Yeah, never better, never better. Especially when we were talking about the weather for about 20, 25 minutes before actually going into the recording. But yeah, so the format that we're going to do for all these, I'm going to split the season into about 5 parts or so. We're going to go from everything from the summer recruitment to that first half of the season, January window, should it be relevant, if you want to call it the winter window, whatever. Second half of the season, and then I suppose more looking towards next season. And then if there's anything else in between, we'll go into that. So first of all, I'll talk about, of course, as much as I'd imagine, you wouldn't want to talk about it too much. The end of the 2022-23 season, of course, you got relegated from League One back down to League Two under John Coleman, who I'm sure we'll go into talk about later on. But in terms of the ambition you had going into this League Two season, you've of course brought in quite a few, I suppose, established names. What were the kind of thoughts you had going into the season? Did you think you would immediately bounce back and aim for promotion again?
I was really hoping that we'd be pushing for at least playoffs. I mean, like some of the big names that we did lose in terms of Ethan Hamilton, Michael Nottingham were like two incredible players for us that we knew would be a huge gap to fill. But when you saw the likes of Brad Hills, who was a 19-year-old on loan from Norwich, we didn't expect him to be as good as he was. But you do always have the excitement of, right, we've got a young, tall centre-back coming in. How's this going to work? But in terms of recruitment, I did think it was quite good over the summer. We did end up with a really good partnership with Gubbins and Brad Hills. Kelvin Mellor, he did have a good season at times. He was a bit up and down. But each player we signed, they had their moments. I mean, Ben Woods has got an extension on his contract for this season, which is really exciting. But he slotted into the midfield. And yes, Ethan Hamilton's boots were big to fill. I feel as though the work that we did with our midfield did help cover for what we did lose with Ethan.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about kind of Ethan big boots. Yeah, what was he, 6'5"? I'd imagine quite big boots in that retrospect. But within all the signings, of course, you had all the pre-season games you played: Bolton, Cambridge, saying that more Chesterfield, York. These kind of teams that are in and around, I suppose, the skill level of League Two. And then you started off the opening day of the season. Do I want to say this? I'm not 1,000,000% sure. Started off opening day with, I say, a trip to Accrington because I'm a Newport fan. But of course, you hosted Newport, beat them 3-0. Do you remember much about that game in terms of the kind of feel for how the rest of the season could pan out, given, of course, we've been in League Two for stupid amounts of times and we're almost that team that everyone looks at and goes, yeah, they're probably the average League Two side you always see.
I did think it was going to be a tough match to go into. I mean, as you said, like you are quite settled in League Two and we didn't really know what we were coming back to. Like when you did look at the teams, I did think, oh, Newport are going to be quite a tough opponent. It was a positive atmosphere for us in terms of we started off with a win and a clean sheet. 3 of our defence were making their debut. So again, you've got the thought of how well are they going to gel together. I mean, like we did see glimpses of it during pre-season, but you don't get a full look of what you're going to do. So it was, I think we had 3 different goal scorers. So you're there like, right, they found their scoring boots over summer. We're off here. We're gonna start it well. But I think just getting unfortunately for you, getting a win on the first day was a great one to try and push on.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree there at all. And in terms of me looking at the end of your August results, you had a game in the EFL Cup, Carabao Cup, whatever you want to call it, against Bradford. Drew 1-1, lost 1-4 rather on penalties. Don't know how I read that wrong. You then proceeded to have a narrow defeat to Gillingham 1-0 when I suppose they were known for beating teams 1-0 at that point. It was then a 1-1 draw at home to Barrow, which I suppose in retrospect was a very solid result. A 2-1 win then over Harrogate when you've had a player send off this. When you look at these results end off August, which was concluded with a 2-1 win away at home to Salford, it looked quite positive. I unfortunately couldn't quite get all the tables and stuff up, but I imagine you'd be quite up there after that first month.
Yeah. The match against Harrogate was a 98th minute winner from Jack Nolan, and the player that got sent off was Seb. Seb Quirk got sent off. It was a second yellow. I think one of them was for time wasting, and then the other was for a tackle. I don't know which way they were, but yes, it was Seb that got sent off.
I love the idea of him being sent off for time wasting. I want it to be that way around. Tackle first, time wasting second. Because you'd imagine any time waste by walking around the pitch a bit more. But yeah, we'll go swiftly on to September when you see everyone's favourite competition being included, the Football League Trophy, or the Bristol Street Motors Cup. I always get that name confused. But it started off with a 3-1 defeat away from home to Notts County. You then start your Football League Trophy campaign against Carlisle, beating them 1-0. And it seemed to have been quite a tough month in September. A loss 3-0 at home to Mansfield, a 4-1 win over Sutton, 2-0 defeat then against Tranmere away from home. I wonder if Seb Quirk was the one to get sent off there. Not 1,000,000% sure, but there's another red card. Then followed up again. You look at it in retrospect, a 3-1 defeat at home to Stockport, not too bad, and that kind of concluded your September. So looks like a bit more of a rough month than it was for August.
Yeah, we did. I think you'll see quite often we do have this. We have huge highs and then quite low lows throughout the season. We did vary in form. We do struggle quite a bit away. I don't know if I'm just the jinx or something, but I hardly see Accrington win away. Like whenever I go, so apologies in advance, Accrington, but I do feel that we did see quite a few more this season. But yeah, the Tranmere one was hard. I think it was J. Rich Bagaloo that got sent off in that one. It weren't Seb. I think Seb could have been on bench for that one. But yeah, we did seem to go for quite a few matches having someone sent off. I think we picked up quite a few, but yeah, that was one of our issues. Was we did get hit with injuries quite early on in the season, and we still had Joe Pritchard recovering from a serious injury, so we were iffy on team selection. So it's like you compare what we had against you to September, October, November, like throughout the season, there's a huge difference to the point where we're playing a striker as a right back. But yeah, September, I think we were still up and around top half, still pushing for what I was hoping to be the end goal of playoffs, but we did really suffer after a month like that.
Yeah, I think for September, and obviously we'll go through every single one of your fixtures, but September for a lot of clubs I noticed was quite a difficult one. You mentioned injuries and having to rotate the squad. I'm just very briefly looking at it. Your team almost looks incredibly different every game because there's obviously news of injuries and stuff. But I suppose credit where credit's due in October. You mentioned that you didn't see many away wins. There's quite a few in the October schedule, actually. It starts off with a 1-1 draw away to Morecambe, followed by a 2-1 win over Forest Green, a 3-5 win away from home to Harrogate in the Football League Trophy, which is, that's an interesting scoreline. In credit where credit's due. A then 2-0 win away may I add, to Grimsby, where they had a player send off, followed by a 1-0 win over MK Dons, a 4-2 win away from home to AFC Wimbledon. And then you concluded the month with a 1-0 defeat at home to Colchester. So it looks a little bit more stable, but in terms of, I suppose, playoff form, it doesn't look quite there.
Yeah, you're still really up and down. I mean, when we got a win against Wimbledon, you're like, right, 4-2, we've got the goals. Can we then get the run on? Can we use that momentum to push forward? And we just went up and down in form. It has been a bit of a frustrating one because there's matches that we should have been winning that we weren't. And then there were just different things to take from it. But I think the main thing we needed was a good running form, whether that was trying to keep players fit or whether it was we just needed a bit of a change. But I think if we'd have got a run going, so 2-3 games where even if we got a couple of draws thrown in the mix, I think it still would have helped to push us on. But we did end up losing too many, and it did end up interfering with the right 1 win, 1 loss, 1 win, 1 loss. And it's like, I don't know how they're doing it.
Yeah, I suppose. And you even look in November. I won't go through every single one of the results like I have been going through, but there's no draws as I can see in November, if you don't include the 2-2 draw you had in the FA Cup first round to Doncaster away. But there's quite a few, I suppose, varying performances, varying quality. You had a 3-1 defeat away from home to Crawley, where there's another red card in there. A 2-0 win at home to Wrexham, which I remember being quite a popular one with your owner, and he got quite a bit of stick for it. And again, quite a few of them include very narrow defeats, as you mentioned. You lost 1-0 away from home to Bradford City, and then concluded November with a 3-4 loss to Swindon. So I question, was it a situation, because I look at it here, there's one game where you concede 3, there's one where you concede 4, and there's another in a cup game where you've conceded 2. So was it a situation of you're still trying to adapt to the kind of defensive issues you may have, whether it be injuries and, things along those kind of lines?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think we went through 5 keepers within the season, which was the most of any team. We had 2 which were on emergency loan, so it was each week we didn't know which keeper we were going to have play. And then the amount of back 4 partnerships that we had, as I mentioned before, we had Matt Law, who's our out-and-out number 9, having to fill in as right back. So it was one of them where when we were able to cement the partnership of Brad Hills and Joe Gubbins, we did see a bit of a difference where, yeah, we were still conceding, but it wasn't to the extent that we were. The Swindon match is actually quite an interesting one. It was 3-0 at half-time, and that was one of our issues where we'd lose matches before half-time. So you're going into the second half and you're like, right, well, they've kind of like lost their heads a bit. Then they scored a 4th for then Accrington to pull back 3 goals within the space of like 10 minutes, I think it was. Not even that. I think it was 93rd, 97th and 100th minute. So we had our centre-back of Brad Hills playing up front to get 2 of the goals. But it's like, if we could have altered something in the first half or not conceded that late 4th goal, it could have been a completely different outcome. So there was like quite a few things to look at in terms of not even just defensively, but we weren't scoring that many in certain matches. But then you go and pull out 3 within 7 minutes and you're like, how are you doing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not very often that you see, 3 goals in a game anyway, or a team score 3 goals. Nor mind you've scored 3 and then lost. And I didn't even notice it was 4-0 before coming back. So I suppose, it almost, I'd imagine that result feels very bittersweet in the way that, like you mentioned, you've almost lost it at half time. But Yeah, December, of course, that's the final month before you talk about the January window, and you kind of talk second half of season. Some of the results in there: a 0-0 draw at home to Doncaster, a 3-3 draw to Crewe Alexandra away, 2-1 win over Walsall, 2-1 loss away from home to Harrogate, which was the game, if I'm not mistaken, in the Football League Trophy, where you had 3-5. So quite a varying scoreline there. And then you end off the year with a 1-1 draw to Barrow. So I suppose it's a little bit more stable going into the window and going into the new year. But like you had mentioned, you're not scoring enough in the certain games, but you're conceding too many, and you're not, I suppose, potentially finding the balance of being able to score while keeping yourself defensively stable.
Yeah, yeah. And it did hit us with, I'm going to have to keep saying it, but injuries, but then also suspensions. So it was like, I don't know when this was, but Brad Hills got sent off at one point in this season. And due to the amount of yellow cards he had, if he got another within his return, he could have ended up with an extra 2-match ban. And we really struggled without him. So we did see a bit of discipline to be an issue with the beginning of the season. I think we've mentioned 3 or 4 red cards already. So that was, and then it was losing the likes of Sean McConville and Seamus Keneally, who were 2 incredible leaders in our midfield and just tried to keep everyone level-headed. And like them 2 are incredible for us, even at the age they are. I think people are always questioning, like, are they actually still there? But we did struggle with who we lost. We did try and bring up some of the like unders in the terms of Conor O'Brien and Alex Henderson, which applause to them. They were outstanding and they took everything on that they could. But yeah, it has been the first half of the season full of ups and downs. I mean, the highs of beating Wrexham at home. We knocked Lincoln out of the Bristol Street Motors Cup with a 1-0 win, which was a great achievement for the club. That was the second time of trying to play that match, because the first one got postponed 2 minutes after it should have kicked off. So that was an interesting one. But yeah, Ros Longello with an absolute worldie in that match. And to say that we came up against the full strength League One side, they had Ethan Hamilton and Lucas Jensen, 2 ex-Accrington players in their side. And they did put out a full strength squad. So to knock them out, you're like, right, if we can do it against them, we can do it against the teams in our league. But there were just, it just didn't seem to click at times.
Yeah, it like I had said, and like you've said, it's a lot of ups and downs. There's no real consistent run of form, and I think in the long run that definitely did impact you. But we'll go into the before going into the January fixtures. In terms of course, the winter window was open at this point. Was there anything that you were personally wanting the club to look into in terms of signing players? I know you mentioned how many injuries you'd had at the back and stuff. So was that a thing you were looking, like, you know, personally as a fan, that you wanted to see the club adapt to?
Yeah, we needed to cement a goalkeeper at first. I mean, going through as many as we did. And we did sign Radek Vitek from Man United on loan, which was an incredible signing. He's one unit of a keeper, but he's incredible. We did also lose Josh Andrews. He returned to his parent club. He was only on loan. And then they went on to sell him. So we were without a striker. We did bring in Jake Bickerstaff on loan. Hardly saw him. I don't know whether that was injury, whether there was an issue or what, but we didn't see enough of him. So we did do a bit of dealings in the transfer window, but it was, I don't think we could have done much more. I think we cemented the keeper, which was one of our main things that we needed to do.
So in terms of course, recruitment that's been mentioned, you then, of course, start the new year, start the again, to second half of the season, if you want to put it that way. Depends where you want to cut the season, but that's the way I'm going to cut it. And of course, all the recruitment and stuff, all the solidification of players is still happening. But you start off the new year with a 3-0 win at home to Salford, which very impressive result, because I believe this was at the point where Salford were really picking up form and looking to push up the table. You then had a 3-1 defeat in the third round of the Football League trophy to Bolton, but I believe there was something a little bit more important going on in that game than the actual result.
Yeah, we always seem to get knocked out of that cup by Bolton. The exact same happened last season, but in the semis. But yes, that match saw Seb Quirk, who, if you watch the Absolute Lower League podcast, you will know that I talk about him near enough every week that I'm on. He got injured earlier on in the season against Stockport, and he tore a tendon in his hamstring, and he made his return to the bench that night. So we did get beat, but seeing Seb back on the bench was a win for me, because he had been out for so long. It had been such a bad injury for him, and he did start off this, apart from getting sent off, he did start off the season quite positive. He was in the squad, whether that be on the bench or in the starting 11. But to then see him injured, and he only came on, I think it was like 10 seconds. So he came on, did it, and then he's off again. So it was like, to see him back on the bench at the Bolton match it was a win.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that, some things are more important than the result, and the return of Seb Quirk, to anyone that listens to the Absolutely Lower League show, will appreciate the return of Seb Quirk, I'm sure. But yeah, in terms of the league, you've got a 2-1 defeat at home to Gillingham, a 1-0 win away from home to Forest Green, a 0-0 draw, which is a rarity looking at this season so far, to Grimsby at home. And yeah, that result is the beginning of February. But still, it seems that, it's very much like you mentioned, win-loss, win-loss. You can't get a real run of form. But I suppose when you mentioned, you solidified, or at least given the fact you had so many emergency loans at goalkeeper, was it a thing of you thought in the second half of the season, you've got a bit more of a gelled squad that can push on?
Yeah, especially, as you said, with Radek Vitek coming in, you're like, right, we've got a keeper. We've cemented quite a few pairings within the team, especially with, I can mention them all the time, Brad Hills and Joe Gubbins were our two standout centre-backs this season. Brad Hills was awarded Player of the Season, and I think he has become, for Aki, the definition of never fall in love with a lone player, because he was everyone's favourite near enough at the club. But yeah, because we did start seeing players returning in January, as I mentioned with Seb. So you're like, right, can we pick up? Can we go on with it? And we did really want a good result at the Gillingham match. It was our Her Game 2 dedicated fixture. So the day was amazing, but the result wasn't the greatest. But yeah, we did really just need to try and get a run going. Like, you're scoring 3 against Salford, I think you said. So to win 3-0 in that one, but then not push on, you're just like, we know we can score. But yeah, I'm shocked with a 0-0 draw, I'll be honest. I'm very shocked with that, but a clean sheet is as important for us to say that we did have our difficulties in defence. It does help massively to see a clean sheet.
Yeah, I think it was, again, that's why I mentioned it as such a rarity, not only a clean sheet, but, you're not scoring in that game. So it's very different towards the, I suppose, the run and form and the consistency that we've seen, or rather, at times, I suppose, that the lack of. But yeah, February was, it again, in terms of the fixtures, very difficult teams that you're playing here. And I'm very, I suppose this was potentially the month where I suppose playoff hopes could have slipped away and that kind of stuff. So as I mentioned, it started with a 0-0 draw at home to Grimsby, followed up with a 2-1 loss away from home to Milton Keynes, then a 2-0 win to AFC Wimbledon at home on the 13th, a 1-1 draw to Colchester. That might have been the red card you were mentioning about Brad Hills. I'm not sure, but that is one of the only other games you've got the red card. There is one more red card, but which is actually quite an important match for unrelated reasons. But in terms of February, you then ended it with, unfortunately, 2 defeats, one at home to Crawley Town, which was 1-0, and then a 2-1 loss away from home to Walsall. So, yeah, very tough month in terms of the fixtures, and a very tough month in terms of the results and how it ended up going. But it's not like you're being convincingly, beaten in any of these games. They're very close to only ever really by 1 goal. So, were there things of promise to take from that, or was it, I'd imagine frustration in terms of you couldn't quite turn these narrow defeats into draws, or even the draws into wins?
There was a bit of frustration because there's like a couple where it's like a 2-1, but we're winning 1-0. And it can be very late goals that were our issue at times for the opposition. But then, as I mentioned a bit earlier, our issue was we were losing games at half-time quite a lot. So we'd be 2 goals down at half-time, 3 goals down. I think the Bradford one, which we'll cover a bit later, that was the same. And so it was, we'd give ourselves too much to do at times to be able to come back. Like, I know you're going into half-time 1-0 down, you're like, right, we can pick it up. 2-0, you're a bit, can we, can't we? But we did have Jack Nolan finding his scoring boots out the season. He was our leading goal scorer. I think it was 17 goals he scored altogether. So it wasn't like we were lacking the goals. It was just, we could score, we just couldn't get the 3 points. We couldn't take them all the way. But there were promising performances from all the players. It was just frustrating to concede quite late on.
Yeah, there's quite a few games here where you're conceding kind of the final third of a match, and I'd understand where the frustration comes. But March started off, and I think this is probably going to be a fixture, not necessarily because of the result, but because of what happened in due course of it. You started off March going to Wrexham, taking them on, losing 4-0, and there's your other red card, just as a bit of mention. But if I'm not mistaken, the day after that game, John Coleman, who was Accrington manager between 2 spells for 2 decades, a bit more than that, he was let go of. And I think a lot of, I suppose, neutrals, people that were just fans of football and knew Accrington for John Coleman, and that loyalty that almost lacks in football nowadays. There was a lot of, I suppose, uncertainty, because on Twitter the statement when it was announced was very brief. But how was the feel around kind of that Accrington space during that time? Because you've got so accustomed to the same manager being in the dugout for, again, better part of 2 decades, closing in on 3 decades. So was it, how uncertain was it during that time? Because at this point, you're near enough safe. You're not worrying about really getting out of the division either way. But losing a kind of figure like that almost, I'd imagine, lives and breathes Accrington for a good majority of it. How did that feel?
It was really odd. I don't think many of us expected it. I mean, you go to Wrexham and you're going to have a tough match, but we didn't really expect it to be a 4-0 thrashing in. Like, their goals just came one after another, and then to top it all off, Lewis Shipley got sent off really late on. So I think that just rounded up the day, to be honest. But yeah, it did come as a shock. We can't thank John and Jimmy enough for what they've done for the club. I mean, it wouldn't be where it is now and where it has been without them. I mean, like the time we spent in League One and some of the matches that we've played, I've got my best memories with. We played Leeds last season in the FA Cup, which I still can't believe. Patrick Bamford was coming up against Accrington Stanley. It was, what we achieved with John and Jimmy is incredible, and it's fair play to them. But it was a really awkward time because the fan base did become very divided. some were saying like, yeah, we need to change, we need to see something happen. And then a lot of others were then saying, no, we need to get them back. And I think that could be seen at the Bradford match, because there was a bit of, I don't know if you call it a protest, there was a little backlash towards the ownership in terms of there was a black banner up, there were flares in use, and you can see what John and Jimmy meant to the club. And I think it was quite hard for the club to deal with, because, as you mentioned, the original statement was very short. It was just like, we've released them and that's it. But personally, I think the club dealt with it really well, because it was they let it pass a bit. A couple of days later, when things have settled, they then released a statement from, like, I think he's called Dave Burgess, and he was thanking them and explained everything that they've done for the club. So I feel as though it looked a bit better than saying like, oh yeah, you've been sacked, but we want to thank you for, and then explaining it, like having the break in between, I feel works better. And then like fans were still chanting their names shortly after them being sacked for the next few games. So I did feel as though it was quite a hard one for Doolan to step into, because you've still got fans chanting for John and Jimmy, but he was able to, like, the fans had their say against Bradford, and then we look to the new and upcoming time with John Doolan. So yeah, it was. I do think it was time for a change. Whether it should have been done mid-season or at the end of the season, I don't know. But we did, like, the form plateaued throughout this season. We were, well, up and down, but then we just started seeing a run of losses or not picking up points. So I do feel as though it became a case of, we knew it was going to start, we knew subs weren't going to be made, and it was quite like, right, if we're going to see any difference, I think it was time. But we can't thank John and Jimmy enough for everything they did for us.
Of course, yeah. I think I reciprocated the kind of same opinions you had at the time of the original statement. There was a lot of question marks, because, like we had mentioned, they've both been at the club for so long, and for it to be that brief and that short did have a bit of a, you wonder, do they kind of understand what John and Jimmy have done? But yeah, I think for the most part, I think they've done really well in terms of, like you said, leaving it for a few days, just so it's not, kind of rushing past the whole new era, I suppose, and disrespecting what they've both done for the club. But yeah, we'll go back into the on the pitch stuff. Like you mentioned, the Bradford game, I suppose a little bit less of the occasion, more, or rather a little bit less of the game, more of the occasion, with, like you mentioned, John and Jimmy's name still being chanted. That was a 3-0 defeat, if I'm not mistaken. Was that the game that Seb Quirk came back to in terms of the league as well? So there you go. You had an added benefit on the pitch as well.
Yeah, we were 3-0 down at half time, and I'm stood there saying, like, can we just make a sub? At this point, just bring anyone on. And then you see him about to come on, and yeah, we're 3-0 down, and it comes to something when you're celebrating a sub coming on more than you are like the result. But yeah, it was. He could have made a couple of appearances before, but this was like his first main 45 minutes, and we kept a clean sheet from him coming on. So you want to play him next season at Accrington? I am more than happy.
There we go. I mean, a coincidence? I think not, personally. But like you mentioned, there was a few games where a little bit of uncertainty with the crowd and everything, but he picked up a solid 2-1 win away from home to Swindon, followed by a 2-2 draw to Notts County at home. Very rare that you actually see a draw here. A 3-1 rather loss to Sutton away from home. I believe this was also a really rough time to play Sutton, because that was when they really started their run. If I'm not mistaken, they started their run for survival in that game. So quite a tough one to take. And then you got concluding the month with a 2-1 loss against Morecambe at home. So even though you've made the change in manager, it's very much same old story, narrowly losing or narrowly drawing and not quite picking up the results. But was it at this point that, you're kind of almost not worrying about the results and you're looking towards next season at this point?
Yeah, the Swindon match was a standout match in like that month for me. It was a hard one because like we did see the big change, but we saw Alex Henderson on the score sheet for that one. Standout player, incredible goal, and to see him playing under Doolan, he did get a bit of a chance under John and Jimmy, but to see him like changing up the team a bit, we did see that where there were players that you don't expect to be benched, so like Dan Martin, Ben Woods, they were on the bench, but he'd brought in different midfielders throughout like the end of the season. So it was quite different if in comparison to what we'd seen, because it looked like he was trying to see what works for him best. So it's like we hit the 50 points, we know we're safe, so let's just see if such and such a body work really well together, because we know we're not going to have like Brad Hills, Joe Gubbins, Lewis Shipley again next season because they were loans. So it did just seem to be where we were still fighting to get the wins, but we were trying to do it differently in each match, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose, when you're going through such a big change, it is merited that you're, of course, going to see adapting on the pitch. And like you mentioned, you've already reached 50 points, you're staying up. And I think experimenting at that point was probably the right call to do, and, playing the players that will stay and further on. But yeah, we'll get into April. I'll cover the second result in this month rather quickly. But of course, final month of the season starts with, I believe this is the second and the out of the 46 games, you've had two of these, another 0-0 draw to Crew at home. I think that's your only second 0-0 draw of the season, which I suppose, shows, one, you're really good goal scoring form, but then at times, having to compensate that for defending and all this other stuff. But then you've got a 3-1 win to Newport, but we'll ignore that game ever happened. Followed by a 4-0 defeat to Doncaster away from home, a 2-1 loss against Mansfield at home. I believe that was the game they solidified promotion, if I'm not mistaken. If not, I'm pretty sure the 4-2 win over Accrington was the 4-2 win for Stockport over Accrington was their game as well to have another lap of honour in terms of course, Stockport won the league there. But you then concluded the season with, I think, probably the shock result of that final day, not out of the whole position moving, but maybe you potentially wouldn't expect it. A 4-1 win at home over Tranmere. So that final month, you've got some really tough games there. Doncaster, Mansfield, Stockport, they were very much up there, Crew especially. And you're competing a lot more in a good majority of them. Bar the Doncaster game, it looks like you're getting a little bit more consistent, or you had been towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I know you're not going to want me to talk about this one, but the Newport win was a good one. I mean, you got to see Seb. He came on.
I got to see Seb. Indeed, I did.
You got to see him.
I heard you shout from the other side of the ground.
Yeah. That was a moment, like 86th minute, I think you were coming on, and yeah, that was a good win for us. I mean, and then you see the run that we did have. I mean, Doncaster, I don't think they lost for half the season. Like, incredible end for them. Then you also have Mansfield. That was the match they got promoted, like they secured promotion. It got to the 80th minute, and you can see the fans are all crowded round the edges. 85 minutes, they're on the pitch, like around, like they just weren't fully on it. They were just, where like the players usually warm up, so just stood behind the white lines. But we couldn't take a corner because they'd surrounded the corner flag. So we've still got 5 minutes to play. It's 2-1 at this point. So we're still trying to get a point out of this, trying to take corner, and we can't. But yeah, that was a very interesting match where as soon as the full-time whistle went, I've never seen some of our players move so quick. They were gone. We did have Jack Nolan and Tommy Lee move to the side and come over to applaud the fans, but yeah, we didn't really expect much from quite a few of the matches during this time. I mean, to score against Mansfield and to hold them to 2-1 was quite good. And then the 4-2 against Stockport, again, to score 2 against Stockport, it's unheard of at times. So for us to be able, struggling Accrington as we were, people would say, to go up against the league title holders and score 2, it was quite good. And then feel as though that kind of boosted our morale for, although we got beat, we were still scoring. And then the 4-1 against Tranmere last match at season, it was a good way to round out the season. You win the first match, you win the last match, so it's like it was good. And then Jack Nolan got his 16th and 17th goal of the season. Lewis Shipley scored, so that was a nice one for him leaving because he was only on loan. And then Alex Henderson had just signed his contract the night before. And then for him to score in front of the Clayton end again, so he did that quite a few times, and he said that was his dream this season, to score in front of the Clayton end and to do it quite a few times, and especially the day after you've just signed a contract, it made it a great day. And afterwards we had Brad Hills announced as player of the season, Ros Longello win goal of the season for his goal against Lincoln, and Jack Nolan be awarded for being our leading goal scorer.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the end, like you mentioned, there's games where you look at it on paper, you're not doing overly well, but to, like you mentioned, have such a close game of Mansfield when everyone knew what was at stake for them, to score 2 against Stockport, where they would have wanted to end the season on a high. So getting 2 against them, where again, albeit you don't have anything to play for either, it's very beneficial, I suppose, to look into the future. But yeah, we'll talk about kind of your end of season, all that stuff. Accrington finished in 17th, 16 wins, 9 draws, 21 losses, 63 scored, 71 conceded, minus 8 goal difference, 57 points. Very steady season for the most part. That not looking in terms of promotion, not looking in terms of relegation. It's definitely a stable one, and to have such a big change in March towards the business end of the season, as people put it, is, I think, overall quite a positive way to outlook it, because it could have, in a different circumstance, not have worked as well in terms of that change. And like you mentioned, whether it should have come at the end of the season or not, it's always going to be questionable. But it seemed your form did improve a little bit, or become at least a little bit more consistent with that change. So in terms of next season, are you also aiming or hoping that you can push for those playoffs, or how are you at least feeling going into it?
I'm feeling a bit more positive about it. I mean, we've done the season in League Two, and I think one of the main aims that Accrington had were, if we don't get promotion, at least stay in League Two, and we succeeded with that. But I do feel quite confident heading into next season. I do feel as though I will be happy with at least a playoff spot. I mean, if we're pushing for automatic, then go wacky, but I think we'll revisit that if we do. But yeah, I think playoffs, especially with the team we're currently building, we finished the season with 3 players in contract. So we had Seb, Jay Rich, and Alex Henderson, who signed it the night before the last match of the season. So it was really right, what are we going to do? We had a lot of fans going through the teams and being right, we'll keep them. Unfortunately, lose them, and we saw that with the retained list of the ones we have let go. There are quite a few that we will miss in terms of Sean McConville and Matt Law. But then we have seen a lot of players be offered extensions in the likes of Dan Martin and Ben Woods, who have been outstanding for us this season. Dan signed a 1-year deal for the season we've just had. And a lot of fans were saying that this was his breakthrough year. Like, he needed to prove his point. He needed to show what he can do. And he really did. I really hope he gets a goal next season. I think that's the only thing he is missing. He's yet to score for Accrington. So if he can get on the score sheet, I think we've got a really well-rounded player in Dan. Even without the goals, he's still an incredible midfielder for us. And the partnership that we're looking at with him and Ben Woods is going to be really good. I do think we need to invest in a striker. We have seemed to let all of them go apart from Josh Woods, who I feel as though playing someone with him will be perfect because he's got the speed and he can go, he's anywhere, he's Josh Woods. So he's always in the right position, he's always trying, he just at times cannot find the back of the net. So to have someone with him, I think that would be quite a good one for us. So a striker would be beneficial, but very excited for the new season and to see what Jed and Doolan can do. Feel as though he's a great addition to the team as assistant manager, and to have them two working together, both really intelligent minds, and both, especially Doolan, understand what the club is and what it means to the fans. So I feel as though it's going to be a very positive season, and hopefully we could be pushing for playoffs.
Oh, I suppose it's a very open league too next season. I think it's something that, you know, a lot of people will talk about. I feel you can probably justify every single team can go for promotion for one reason or another. But at the end of the day, you know, you've done it before. You've won this league. You've been promoted out of it, and I understand that, you know, you've had a lot of changes since then, but the entire aspect of Accrington and stuff is still there. So yeah, I think that I've probably, you know, I haven't really done preseason predictions yet, but I'll probably putting Accrington around that kind of spot anyway, just out of the whole experience and everything else in between. But yeah, in case you have anything else you want to put it towards kind of Accrington season and, you know, favorite moments or all that kind of stuff, I feel we're towards that part where we can wrap it up.
I think one of my favourite moments was the Lincoln match. I feel as though like that was an incredible win for us, knocking out a League One side, and we're like proving we can do it. But then to get Bolton in the next round, we're always playing them. It feels like whenever we've been knocked out of that cup last season, semi-finals, Bolton. This time, Bolton. You're just like, why? But yeah, Lincoln was a really good one. In terms of like, it's been a season of everything, to be honest. You've seen Accrington trending on Twitter for many different reasons. Manager swaps, players going in and out. I don't think at the beginning of the season I'd have ever thought we'd have 5 goalkeepers playing for us, but here we are at the end of the season. It's been one of ups and downs, but hopefully the fan base has stuck together throughout it all, and the support that Doolan is receiving is immense. You could hear him at Newport chanting John Doolan's Buy Me Army at the end when he came round. And then, like, my main thing, and I say this every week on the podcast, please, Accrington, play Seb. Please just play Seb. I've seen him play at Everton, and I personally think he is very good. Please play him at Aki so other people can see this. But where are we playing him? Is it midfield or right back? Because he is a midfielder, but we play him more as right back. So just, if you need to play him, just play him, please, Aki. But yeah, that's like the main thing. If we've got a striker as a right back throughout a season, then anything's possible for us at this point. But it will be hard to see like the likes of Brad Hill's go, I really want him to succeed at Norwich. So I think if they don't get promoted, because when we're filming this, we don't know who's getting promoted. If they don't get promoted, I feel as though he will be one to watch in the Championship, along with the likes of Joe Gubbins. I think we did fall lucky with our loans this season, and hopefully regroup in the summer, get a couple more in, and we're off.
Well, yeah, I suppose that is, entirely reasonable. And I thought I'd open it up. Of course, the Championship playoff semi-finals are going on right now. We're 31 minutes into Leeds playing Norwich. Leeds are 2-0 up. So we're in the potential that Brad Hills will be the name to watch in the Championship anyway. So there we go. But yeah, I think that's kind of all the things we, can kind of cover on this season as a whole. So first of all, Rebecca, thank you for joining me to talk about Accrington. And of course, as Shah does on the Absolute Lower League show every week, if anyone wants to find you, where can they find you?
They can find me at Her Game 2 ASFC. I am the Her Game 2 advocate for Accrington, so you can find me there. And then my personal one is, let me get the point. There it is. There's a lot of underscores in it, so I'll leave it there.
I'll put it all in the description anyway. So make sure to go check out the stuff that Rebecca does, whether it be Her Game 2 stuff or her own individual stuff. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to chat Accrington with me.
Thank you for listening to my Accrington waffle and my many, many, many mentions of Seb Quirk.
I don't think personally it was enough. I feel that this needs to be a weekly podcast just talking Seb Quirk. But yeah, that's the, of course, Accrington wrap up, or the Accrington 2022 or 2023-24 season wrap up there. Of course, we've got 23 more of these to go. So, plenty more things to watch during the month of June. But yeah, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you did enjoy. Comment your thoughts on whether you're an Accrington fan, you want to comment your thoughts on the season, or if you're a League Two fan, you want to comment on Accrington, feel free to. But yeah, other than that, the support channel, wherever you see fit, using the links in the description. Of course, like I have mentioned, check out Rebecca's stuff. They'll probably be towards the top line of the descriptions. Thank you for watching or listening, depending on how you're viewing this. And yeah, see you soon. Take care.